Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And thank you to my friends and colleagues in the Delaware Congressional delegation and to our Attorney General, Kathy Jennings. I'm watching the numbers tick up as people are logging on and tuning in. I'm Senator Chris Coons from Delaware, and it's my honor to be a part of this evening where we are talking about the challenges to our nation from President Trump. He has been in office as president fewer than 60 days. But it seems like a lot longer than that, certainly to all of us. Republicans have been tearing apart federal agencies. Elon Musk and his unelected Doge group has laid off tens of thousands of people, from those who provide mental health to veterans to those who ensure that we have clean air and water as families, and the impact on our economy of Trump's imposition of tariffs, putting them on again, off again, on again, off again, on our closest partners and allies, have roiled the stock markets and raised prices rather than cut them. And then on the international stage, he has threatened to betray Ukraine and puzzled our closest allies and encouraged our adversaries with a range of bizarre threats to seize Greenland and make Canada the 51st state and retake the Panama Canal. I'm not going to focus much on that tonight, but just wanted to open by reminding all of us on this call tonight that it's been a rough more than 50 days of the second Trump administration. The outreach to our offices from Delawareans has been remarkable. And I'm grateful for each and every one of you who's made the effort to reach out and to express your concerns, your hopes, your fears, your anger, and to ask us to engage with you. One of the questions I get all the time is, what can we do? How do we stand up for our values? Where do Democrats and where do Delawareans go from here? And we're going to speak to this in more detail later this evening. But first, just by joining us, you're taking action. I appreciate that. This is an evening event hosted in part through the Delaware Democratic Party. So it is appropriate for us to speak to partisan issues in a way we couldn't in our last town hall, which was done on Senate time or on Congressional time and with Congressional staff. There are upcoming races and elections in New Jersey and Virginia, Wisconsin, a Supreme Court election in Pennsylvania, a Supreme Court election that will have a big impact on the map for the midterms, which my colleagues will also speak to. But frankly, you can also get very active and engaged in the Delaware Democratic Party here at home. Deldems.org is a great website to look at. There are meetings this evening and coming up in the next couple of weeks that are critical for the reorganization and refocus of the Delaware Democratic Party. More than anything, we need to take care of ourselves, invest in our communities, stay active, and be engaged. This isn't just a 60-day sprint. It's going to be a several-year-long challenge for all of us. So we need to take care of our communities and our families, take care of ourselves, and lock arms and work hard together. And I am so grateful for my colleagues. I am now going to turn this over to my friend and partner in the Senate, Senator Lisa Blunt Rochester.
Thank you, Senator Coons. I'm going to be very brief because I know there are a lot of questions, but I want to first start off by saying thank you for your presence and your participation here. Thank you for your votes that allowed each of us to be able to even do the work that we're doing right now at this very present moment. For me, I was excited about going to the Senate. I have been blessed to be your congressperson, and we all knew that this was going to be a challenging time. Project 2025 was written out, plain sight, like we saw some of this coming. But I think that part of the intention is to flood the zone and to make us think that we will not persevere and that we will not be victorious. And I think my other reason for my gratitude for this call, this Zoom, is to let you know that we are each not in this by ourselves. We're in this together as a Democratic family. And so I want to thank everyone for your calls, your texts, your prayers. People have said to me, on the one hand, we are praying for you, Lisa. And on the other hand, they're saying, give them hell. And so we feel it, we hear you, and that's one of the reasons for tonight's conversation, not in our official capacity. Lastly, I will say I do believe that I was thinking back on generations before us who went through some incredibly hard things. And even if our minds were to keep thinking of what the future could hold, looking at what they've done in just the past 2 months, you really could do a spiral, but we need to stay focused. We need to remember that we have been through tough times as a country, and some of us personally and professionally, and that, again, we're in this together. So we'll get a lot of your questions hopefully answered. As the senator said, our phones have been ringing off the hook, so much so that they've had to increase the capacity of our voicemails and had to, I mean, it has been, because it's not just us that are feeling it, we're all feeling it. And so just wanted to say thank you. Just wanted to say we're in this together. We look forward to answering the many questions that you've submitted. And again, I'm grateful. I am grateful to be representing you for such a time as this. And I now turn it over to our very capable, very compassionate, brilliant Congresswoman, Sarah McBride.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Blunt Rochester and Senator Coons. I am so proud to be serving in Washington alongside you two, alongside these two incredible fighters for Delaware. And of course, working alongside our fierce Attorney General, Kathy Jennings, alongside our governor. We've been referring to this group as Team Delaware. Because every single day we wake up and the first thought in our minds is, how can we fight for Delaware? How can we protect Delaware at this moment? And I am so grateful to everyone who is joining us on this Zoom. And as Senator Blunt Rochester said, so incredibly grateful that so many of you turned out in November and entrusted me with the awesome and awe-inspiring responsibility of representing the greatest state in the union in the United States House of Representatives, following in the big shoes of our now Senator Lisa Blunt Rochester. And obviously, when I ran for Congress, when I announced my campaign as I worked through November of 2024, I was hoping that I would enter in a Democratic majority in the House alongside a Democratic majority in the Senate and a Democratic majority or a Democratic president in the White House, so that we could do what we have done here in Delaware: pass paid family and medical leave, guarantee affordable childcare for more families, provide affordable health care for more patients, so that we could do what we've done here in Delaware and raise the minimum wage and pass common sense gun violence prevention measures. And while Delaware understood the assignment in November of 2024, unfortunately, the Congress that I am entering and have entered into is a very different one than the one that I hoped, a Washington that is very different than the one I hoped for. And look, I don't have to tell the folks on this Zoom what is at stake. This is a five-alarm fire for our economy, for our democracy, for our dignity, and for our rights. And while some on the other side want to pretend like the chaos and the corruption that we are seeing from this administration is a figment of our imagination, we know that this administration and Republicans in Congress are already having a dangerous impact on our state. The illegal funding freezes that we've seen across the federal government are already hitting our state. More than $100 million in funding for infrastructure projects through DelDOT being withheld that is owed to Delaware. Roughly $10 million that is owed to farmers being withheld. Just the other week, Classy, an incredible nonprofit in Delaware that is the sole fair housing enforcer in our state, saw their $500,000 federal contract canceled, arguably illegally, leaving thousands of families that they serve, renters and homeowners, behind. the consequences extend far beyond those examples. Those are just a few of the tangible consequences we are already seeing for Delaware. And every single day that I travel up and down the state, I hear the fear from the folks on this Zoom and across our state. Fear from Democrats, independents, and yes, fear from Republicans who have consistently said that this is not what they voted for, that they didn't vote to see funding for farmers cut, that they didn't vote to see funding for renters and homeownership cut, that they didn't vote to see Medicaid cut. And that is really the next big fight ahead of us. Many of you have heard about the reconciliation package that the Republicans are putting forward. We took our first vote on that process a couple of weeks ago. It set it in motion, passing the House on partisan lines. And at the center of that fight is the effort to protect Medicaid, to protect healthcare for roughly 1 in 4 Delawareans, 1 in 4 Americans. Senator Coons and Senator Blunt Rochester and I were at Christiana Care today with patients, parents, and providers, raising the alarm, raising our voices to push back on this draconian and heartless budget proposal that they are putting through the reconciliation process, raising our voices to protect Medicaid, veterans benefits, food assistance, all of the life-saving programs and life-empowering programs that Delawareans rely on. We will continue to do that. And I know we're going to get into questions, but it is so important to reinforce that your voices matter in this fight. Yes, you are represented by Democrats who are fighting every single day for our state and for our country. Yes, you have an attorney general that is representing us in court. But when you reach out to us, we bring those voices and those stories to the halls of Congress to illustrate the harm that this administration and Republicans in Congress want to inflict on our state. And by supporting Democrats across the country, by phone banking into Republican-held districts, you can help us put the pressure on our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to do what enough Republicans did in 2017 when they saved Medicaid, and that is to stand up to Donald Trump and vote to protect our healthcare and vote to protect our democracy. And with that, at the core of the fight for our democracy is our state attorney general, who's been in the courts since day one, pushing back on the illegal power grabs of this administration. And I'll turn things over to our wonderful Attorney General, Kathy Jennings, to talk us through the work she and her office are doing.
Thank you, Congresswoman McBride. And thank you to our congressional delegation for inviting me to join and for continuing to organize these very critical town halls. This is a frightening moment for our country, but we will get through this ordeal together. And to do our part, we need to hear from you. We're looking now at a very different beast from the first Trump administration. This time around, thanks to Project 2025, as Senator Blunt Rochester mentioned, this administration is far more organized and deliberate in their attacks on people they don't like and on rules they don't follow. Look, if you want to stop waste and fraud, we all agree. Let's make government work better for the people. But don't break something and tell me it's efficiency. Trump and Musk's reckless cuts impact real people of both parties, and people are mad as hell about it, as they should be. They're cutting with a chainsaw, and we all know who's going to get hurt. Veterans, people on Medicaid, people on Medicare, and on Social Security. Anyone who relies on healthcare, public safety, and medical research. Unless you are a billionaire, these cuts hurt you, and they don't care. Our office has sued to block the federal funding freeze, to protect medical research funding, to protect birthright citizenship for the American children of immigrants. We have sued to stop the sabotage of the Department of Education, and to protect federal workers from unjust and illegal mass firings. And while we're not taking anything for granted, we have yet to lose a case. We are winning. And why are we winning? Because we respect the rule of law, we respect our Constitution, and we are right. I am steadfast in this mission, as is everyone joining us here tonight. I'm so grateful for the strength and work of our delegation. We are Team Delaware, and Delaware is unique because the four of us can join as one and speak with one powerful voice. And we're going to continue to fight like hell to protect your democracy, to protect your rights, and to protect, frankly, the lives you hold so dear in our state. Thank you so very much, and I will return us to Senator Chris Coons.
Thanks, Kathy, and thanks to the delegation, everybody, for joining us this evening. We've got a whole bunch of questions. I'm going to try and help us move through those questions quickly and get answers to as many of them as we possibly can this evening. Sandra in Milton asked our first question this evening. What is uniting Democrats? And Sandra, thanks for asking that question. As you heard from our Congresswoman earlier today, our delegation and our Lieutenant Governor and other folks came together to fight the Medicaid cuts that are a key part of the Republican agenda. Through some complex process that's called reconciliation, you can once a year pass a big bill that has financial consequences through the Senate with just 51 votes. You can get around the filibuster. And so what Republicans are going to be doing for the next several months is assembling and passing through the House and then putting together and trying to pass through the Senate a big reconciliation bill that will cut hundreds of billions of dollars from Medicaid in order to finance huge tax cuts for billionaires and the wealthiest individuals and most profitable corporations in our country. Every single Democrat is opposed to cutting Medicaid. Why? Because Medicaid cares for disabled children, for those who are looking for dignity in their later years and finding a nursing home that they can afford, for those who are getting mental health care and substance abuse treatment, for newborns. 4 out of 10 children born in Delaware, their care for maternal and child health is through Medicaid. It touches 250,000 Delawareans directly, and all of us, all of our health care is impacted and improved by Medicaid. There's a lot more. Obviously, the court actions the Attorney General is taking, things that we are going to be doing to pull us together as a party. But I wanted to just give one concise answer. What's uniting Democrats? Fighting Medicaid cuts and making sure that we're united in fighting the actions that Republicans are taking and trying to persuade enough of them to join us that we can turn back the tide on their disastrous cuts to Medicaid. Our second question tonight is from Mary in Wilmington.
Senator?
Yes.
I just have to jump in on this because we are united that Elon Musk is not elected and should not have the authority that he has. We are united that it is illegal to rescind the laws. We have already passed laws. We've already put out the money, and that's what's causing so much confusion and so much fear and so much chaos. The freezes that are happening to people who serve us right now, we are united that this is not wrong. It's why our attorney generals are fighting this in the courts. And then I think we are united, as you mentioned, in making sure we don't slash Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security that people fought and invested in for themselves, and that we support our veterans who are 1/3 of the federal workforce and are being impacted negatively. All of this, while we have not seen the cost of goods go down on day one as we were told that they would. So we are united in trying to make sure that we fight this and that we also focus on the people. I just had to share that, as well as Medicaid. We are united on those things.
Anybody else want to pitch in on that first question?
I will just also reiterate that not only do I think the party is united on the stakes and the urgency, I think this delegation is united. I think this delegation has been operating in lockstep. Every single leader on this Zoom, elected leader on this Zoom, has been fighting every single day. They've been voting like all of our lives depend on it, like our democracy depends on it. I think all of us are united that in recognizing that this is not normal, that this is a unique time, that this is in many ways, in modern history at least, an unprecedented time. And I think this delegation, Delaware understood the assignment in November. I think this delegation understands what the assignment is right now. And I think our voices and our votes reflect that reality.
And I will just add this. You are all angry. We are all angry. And that is one unifying factor right now, because what's happening here is hurting Delawareans, is hurting the people in our country. Patriotism is not just about loving America. It's about loving Americans. It's about loving Delawareans. Project 2025 is not just morally, ethically, and legally wrong. It's a betrayal of our history, of our leadership, and of our very community, the things that make us great. It's hurting our neighbors, our coworkers, our kids, people who are American, whether the administration respects that or believes that or not. And so when we look at Team Delaware here, we are united as one along with you, and we need your help.
To our second question, Mary from Wilmington asks, please explain why some Democrats voted to support the Republican continuing resolution. Why did Democrats cave? Well, Mary, I'll simply start by saying the three of us all voted against it. But Lisa, Senator, why don't you start?
Getting off of mute here. You know, I will tell you, we had some very spirited, and that's a nice way to say it, conversations in our caucus with unanimity in some of the things that I mentioned in that last question, which is why I felt it was important to chime in on that last question. There was a lot of discussion about the impact of a government shutdown versus the impact of passing that continuing resolution, which would have continued to fund the government. And the challenge that people had was that we've never been in a place like this before, as Sarah said, where some folks thought if you go into a shutdown, number one, that might be what they want. Number two, we might not get out of a shutdown. And number three, that would give more flexibility and room for more lawlessness. There were others who felt with this continuing resolution, while we don't know what they might do with the shutdown, which also there was a lot of concern about the shutdown of the courts, that right now is the thing that's holding us. It's the courts, is where we have some lever and some power. And they were concerned that if the courts ran out of money, then we would not have the levers of power even in the courts. Those, for myself, and I think for Senator Coons, we were like, well, that's the unknown and that's scary. But the CR was known and scary. And so for some members, they took what they thought was the right decision. For the two of us, it was very clear that, you know, I received a text and that morning, one of my dearest friends works for the VA, and she said to me, basically, I assume you're going to vote no because we don't let bullies run over us. And so for us, it really was about veterans, Medicaid, Medicare, what we knew potentially was coming. And For others, they made the choices that they made based on some of the things that I just shared. And I don't know, Chris, if you want to add to that as well, their rationale.
Look, we had a tough judgment call to make. Lisa and I saw it the same way. I'm an appropriator. We worked really damn hard on our appropriations bills, and we were ready to move forward on a 30-day continuing resolution and to fight for the bills that we'd already gotten done at Biden-era spending levels. Some folks in leadership in our caucus, Senator Schumer, a few others, saw it very differently. I'm going to focus on moving forward and on what unites us. We got a lot of input from Delawareans. Thank you. And I stand by my vote. But I frankly think we need to move forward, and we need to find ways that our caucus and our party can be united and fight with one voice and speak with one voice. What disappointed me was that it was very foreseeable that we would end up in a tough vote on a CR. We are going to end up in the same place 6 months from now. And so we need leadership that can help us coordinate between the House and the Senate, have a common message, and focus in going in the same direction. I agree with Senator Blunt Rochester. This administration has acted more lawlessly than any in my lifetime. And that caused some folks to be really concerned about a shutdown and our never reopening the government, and Trump just laying off hundreds of thousands of federal workers, which frankly he's doing anyway. So thank you, Attorney General, for what you're doing to stand up to him. If I could, why don't I ask Attorney General Jennings to answer the next question so we can get a few in before we wrap up. David in Newark asked, what can Democrats in Congress and the states do to stop President Trump's hijacking of the federal government? Kathy?
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. There's a lot that we can do. First of all, the attorneys general across the country, Democratic attorneys general, we are united also as one. And we can't fight every fight. There are some cases that we don't have the legal requirements to be able to file. But I'm going to tell you this, we file each and every time that it makes a difference to the people in our state. We started with birthright citizenship. And when Donald Trump tried to take away a right explicitly guaranteed by the 14th Amendment that was passed in the wake of slavery, when the children of slaves were not deemed citizens of the United States. That's why the 14th Amendment enables babies born in this country to be citizens of our country. And so we filed a lawsuit immediately. It was the first one we filed, and we won. That case is headed for the United States Supreme Court, and I am very optimistic that they will uphold the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. The second case we filed was to call a halt to his funding freeze. He ordered a halt to all funding, federal funding into our states, despite the fact that the members of Congress had passed a law guaranteeing that funding, and it appropriated money to make sure that those funds were available to states. That's why we have 3 branches of government. He does not get to overrule Congress by his unlawful actions. And so we filed a lawsuit and we won that as well. We believe that given the strength of the order by the judge, that all federal funding to states should continue. And that's what the judge ordered. That case, too, will likely make its way to the Supreme Court of the United States. But in the meantime, we are going to hold the president's feet to the fire. We filed a motion to enforce that rule when he was not following it. And we'll file more and more of those as is needed to make sure that funding comes into our states. We filed a lawsuit to protect the National Institute of Health funding medical research into cures for disease, among other things. And we won that as well. We most recently filed a lawsuit, 2 lawsuits, one to tell the president, you illegally fired thousands of federal workers. And we won that as well. We now have an order that says you can't do that. You have to reinstate all of these people who were illegally fired. And finally, we filed a lawsuit to stop his gutting of the Department of Education. He is destroying that agency in one fell swoop by firing a large percentage of the people within it. The U.S. Department of Education is vitally important to all of our states, and vitally important to Delawareans, so that children get the kind of education they're entitled to. And we have to protect that. So we most recently filed that lawsuit, and I am confident that we will win that as well. So at each and every turn, when he hurts people in our state, we sue and we win. That's the rule of law. That's our Constitution. And I'm so proud to be part of this fight.
Kathy, if I could add something, my strong impression is that Democracy Forward and the ACLU have been critical partners in this work, that your office could benefit from some volunteer legal work or assistance, and that those two organizations, democracyforward.org, has a great website that helps folks stay up to date on where the different lawsuits are. If anyone on this call wants to contribute financially or with pro bono legal resources or time, the ACLU, Democracy Forward, and Attorney General Jennings' office are all places where you could put resources or time to work. Kathy, any further comment on that?
No, I think it's a great suggestion. We are working hand in glove with Democracy Forward and with the ACLU. There are cases that we can't bring as state attorneys general, and those organizations bring those cases. The unions have been hugely important in protecting people's workers' rights, and they have been bringing cases. So yes, we need your help. We also need your help by getting out there and demonstrating and showing that you are angry and you're not going to take it. And you're going to vote. When the time comes, you are going to vote, and you're going to vote for democracy. And that's a voice that is stronger than anything else. Thank you.
So Jill in Seaford asked a similar question. What can I do to help stop Trump's actions? Congresswoman, why don't I ask you to pick up on that theme about direct action and what it is that folks on this call can do personally, in addition to sending contributions to organizations like ACLU or Democracy Forward. What can individuals do to help bring their voice to this fight?
Sure. Well, thank you, Senator. This is certainly
Sorry, I heard Congresswoman and I started to talk. Sorry, Sarah. That was a slip. Sorry.
That's too funny. You will always be our Congresswoman, Senator. So that's a great question, Senator Coons. And this is certainly an all hands on deck moment. I mentioned at the start, there's a lot to be done internally in Delaware, obviously making sure that you are reaching out to our offices to let us know what you think, particularly if you're willing to do it via the webpage, so that phone lines are still open for folks who need that direct service, direct assistance on access to benefits, for instance, but letting us know what you think about legislation before us. That helps us as we go to the floor, as we talk with our colleagues, to share the passion and the anger. Many of us are also collecting stories. We have a link on our website and social media for people to submit stories about Medicaid. As I mentioned earlier today, we had a number of Delawareans sharing incredibly powerful stories that will appear not only in media here in Delaware, but media that is regional. And that includes Pennsylvania, where a number of Republicans in swing districts live and represent. And making sure that we are educating people in our region and around the country is key. So stepping away from just Delaware, everyone is friends with people outside of Delaware. And my guess is that you have friends in Republican states, in Republican districts. encouraging them to reach out to their own members of Congress, just as you are doing, goes a long way. There are organizations like Move On and Indivisible and others that are mobilizing folks around specific legislative actions and opportunities for direct action. And so coming back home, having you out at protests and at rallies across the state is key. I've joined with many of you in Rodney Square recently to protest DOJ's efforts to decimate the federal government. Keeping up those very loud and public displays of opposition to what this administration is doing is key in helping to mobilize not just the people who are on this Zoom, but others who need to understand that they are not alone in being outraged by what they're seeing, and there is something that they can do about it too. And then finally, politically, electorally, we've got elections in November in New Jersey and Virginia. Sending a strong message in those gubernatorial races is going to be incredibly important in stunting any momentum this administration has, making clear the public opposition and the electoral consequences to this Republican billionaire first agenda. That's going to be key. And then there are districts across the country in Pennsylvania and Iowa and Minnesota and New York that can make the difference in having a Democratic majority in the House. We want to fight for a Democratic majority in the Senate, but we have a real opportunity to elect Hakeem Jeffries the next Speaker of the House. So supporting races, candidates in key races in those swing districts now and in the months and 2 years ahead is going to be critical so that we can have a House that is fulfilling its constitutional obligation to hold this administration accountable.
Chris, could I just add one, or Senator, one thing that the Congresswoman said? Chris, one thing that Sarah said that I think is important about reaching out to your Republican family and friends. First of all, these things are affecting everybody, and we're hearing it from Democrats, Republicans, and independents, as she said. But we only need 3 Republicans in the House to stand up, right? And 4 in the Senate. Did I get those numbers right? Yeah, to stand up to some of this, because it can't just be us, especially when they control the House, they control the Senate, and they control the White House. So again, that piece about having these conversations, sharing the impact that this is having on you is really important as well.
Thank you. Look, we need your voices. We need your engagement. We need your support. And bluntly, if President Trump takes the next step and just blatantly ignores the orders of the court, we're going to need folks to come out to the streets, because that's the real constitutional challenge that seems as if it will come our way in any moment. He has so far, more than not, complied with court orders, but he is coming right up against the very edge. Attorney General Jennings, I don't know if you disagree with me, but this is as close to a constitutional crisis to a coup as we've had in our history, certainly since the Civil War.
I absolutely agree with you, Senator. And I never thought we'd see this country at this stage in our lifetimes, but that's exactly what's going on. I think that they are weighing the possibility of ignoring judges' orders. They've already denigrated the judges who have stood up to the president. They have called for them to be impeached. And the next step is to just blatantly ignore the order. That is an existential crisis for this country.
Yep.
They are the third branch of government, co-equal, and they don't have an army. They're judges. They tell us what the law is and we obey it, even when we don't like it, because we all respect the rule of law. And that's what we're founded upon. If he ignores it, then that's the time, I think, when mass numbers of people will take to the streets and say, not in our country, not in America, not in the America I live in.
Just a reminder that even President Richard Nixon, in the very worst of Watergate, obeyed the Supreme Court. but he obeyed the Supreme Court in no small part because a group of senior Republican senators went down to the White House and said, if you don't obey the Supreme Court, you've lost us. Right now, Republican senators are not standing up to Donald Trump. They're confirming some of the worst, most inappropriate, incapable nominees in history when they know better. And they are standing by and watching as he lets Elon Musk and Doge tear through agencies, get access to your personal information, put our key alliances at risk. They've come as close as I've seen them ever to opposing Trump over his shockingly disrespectful treatment of Zelensky in the White House and threatening Ukraine with cutting off intelligence assistance and military resupply, and with some of the steps to fire and lay off thousands and thousands of veterans. But they have not stood up yet. Let me move to the next question, if I could. Judy from Dover asks, Trump pretty much held a Tesla car show on the front lawn of the White House. Isn't that unethical or illegal? Well, Judy, it's both. And yes, the blatant and transactional nature of the relationship between Elon Musk and President Trump is disturbing and alarming. I'll remind you that the day after he held this car show and President Trump tried to put a floor under the collapsing stock price of Tesla, it was pretty striking that the only part of the economy he seemed to really care about was Tesla's stock price. This is a president who's gone on for years about how much he hates electric vehicles, and here he is hawking electric vehicles on the front lawn of the White House. Elon Musk pledged another $100 million on top of the $250 million he's already spent to help President Trump's midterm efforts after that shocking display. President Trump fired most of the inspector generals in his first week in office. Those are the folks who are supposed to be the watchdogs. And bluntly, just because it's happening blatantly and publicly like that car show on the front lawn of the White House doesn't mean that it's any less corrupt or any less illegal. Anyone else want to comment on this particular shameful episode?
I would just say you are dead on right, Senator Coons. This is outrageous. This is not what a president does. I mean, we had the president go to the United States Department of Justice and appear with Attorney General Pam Bondi together, united, because the U.S. Department of Justice is no longer a separate agency, as it has been since I can remember. That you did not mix these two. And the U.S. Department of Justice has to make its own independent decisions about prosecutions, about cases that they bring, about cases that they defend. That's a sacrosanct aspect of our government. And right now, there's no separation. She works for him. She works for him.
Excuse me. Thank you. Let me move to our sixth question. Why can't Congress stop the tariffs? I'll simply say first, if I might, that I have a bill with Tim Kaine to do just that. It's called the Stable Act, and it would pull back congressional power that we gave away decades ago. Congress passed a statute in the 1960s, but assumed that a president, a rational and sane president, would only impose double-digit tariffs on an enemy in wartime, and did not imagine that something like what is happening today would happen, where Trump is using national security justified tariffs to impose huge tariffs on Canada, one of our most trusted allies. So the EU and Canada and Mexico are facing big tariffs, and that's a real challenge. The bill that I've introduced would require Congress to approve the imposition of tariffs on companies with whom we have a free trade agreement or where we are treaty allies. Any comments from other members of the delegation?
I'll just add that I was appointed to the Commerce Committee in the Senate. And over the course of these couple of weeks, we have had hearings on Greenland, the Panama Canal. Let's see, what other, just the most things that, instead of really focusing on something like tariffs, which we know are vital. I had a person who works for Lowe's say to me, we are about to go into the summer. We don't make barbecue grills in this country. Barbecue grills already had tariffs on them from the last Trump administration. So now we're talking about adding more tariffs to that could jack up the price 50%. I met with Jay Powell from the Federal Reserve. I said, are tariffs taxes? They say they're not. They say we're not going to feel them. He said, you either pay at the exporter, the importer, the retailer, or the consumer. Who's going to feel this? All of us. We've seen it in egg prices. We can just go down the list. And so for the longest speech for the State of the Union joint address that has probably ever happened, only 13 minutes of it were on the economy and bringing down costs for people. And so what is going to have to happen is when people start feeling this, we're going to, back to what the senator and the congresswoman said, people are going to have to show their displeasure at it, because it's going to affect everyone. And then there's just the piece of this that is our national security and our partners and our allies and who are our friends and who are not. Mexico, Canada, we're talking about countries that have been our allies and that we have trade agreements with. I think all of us will tell you, we believe in government efficiency. We believe in making sure that there's not waste, fraud, and abuse. We've actually run things where we've actually had to do this kind of governing. But what this is about is not that. Taking a chainsaw and then calling it a wood chipper and now it's a scalpel is not how you do workforce planning. That's not how it works. And ultimately, slashing Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security is about tax breaks, tax giveaways to billionaires. That's it. And this power grab is really about seizing power. We don't have a king. We don't want a king. And we're all going to just have to play our part in this moment to make sure that we stand up. We're going to do it in different ways, but we all have to just do our part. Turn it back to you, Chris.
Can I just say something on top of what both senators just said about tariffs? What we are seeing right now is potentially the Achilles heel of this administration. Because what we are seeing is Donald Trump being incapable of stopping himself with the policy that he has been obsessed with for decades. And consistently, when I talk to businesses, small and larger businesses alike, everyone across every ideological perspective is saying that this administration's actions on tariffs, not even just whether they go into effect, the zigzagging and the seesawing and the chaos that we are seeing on this is decimating the economy. This is a self-imposed potential recession that we could be heading into. And let me just say one more thing about the tariffs, particularly as it relates to Canada, but in both instances. We all want the United States to have a fair deal when it comes to trade. We all want to make sure that we are onshoring more industries to this country. In fact, that's one of the reasons why Senator Coons and Senator Blunt Rochester voted for the CHIPS Act, which Donald Trump is now trying to undo, to onshore advanced manufacturing, high-tech manufacturing to this country. But Donald Trump is pushing forward the idea of tariffs against our neighbors because he says that trade between our countries is unfair. Well, the current trade deal that the United States is operating under was negotiated by this president during his first term, and he called it the best trade deal ever. So was he lying then or is he lying now? Honestly, probably both.
One of the next questions we've gotten repeatedly, I'll turn to you, Congresswoman. What's the path for Democrats to take back the Senate and the House in 2026? And I'll tell you bluntly, the path is pretty tough in the Senate. We've got some key states that we're going to have to defend. We're going to have to fight hard. But I am optimistic about the House. Congresswoman, would you like to take that question?
I am optimistic as well. So as folks know, prior to 2 weeks ago, Republicans had a 3-seat majority in the House. Unfortunately, that majority has expanded a little bit because of the tragic loss of my freshman colleague, Representative Sylvester Turner, and Representative Grijalva from Arizona. I'm optimistic that those seats will remain in Democratic hands once the special elections in those states go forward. So we only need to pick up a handful of seats. And there is a real opportunity, even if we just replayed the 2024 election, that if 7,000 votes switched in 3 districts, there would be a Speaker Hakeem Jeffries right now. And it is my hope that if we continue to do the work before us, and I'll get to that work in just a second, but if we continue to do the work before us, that 2026 will be an even better year for Democrats. So if we have that baseline where 7,000 votes in 3 districts could get us the majority, if we continue to push public opinion along and it continues to move away from this president and Republicans in Congress, I'm cautiously optimistic that we can win the majority and provide that bulwark, that safeguard for our democracy and that level of accountability. Like I mentioned, there are districts in Pennsylvania, just over the line in northeastern Pennsylvania and the Harrisburg area that are potential pickups for Democrats. There are seats in New York, there's a seat in Iowa, the Iowa 1st, that are potential pickups for Democrats. If you track Cook Political Report, there are a number of websites that will show you which districts are in play. And when the time comes, when there are candidates established in those races, giving to those candidates, just as you hopefully support the Delaware Democratic Party, which is partnering with us on this Zoom, that will go a long way in helping us get the majority. But and this is important not just for the elections, this is important in stopping the administration in the shorter term too. Much of this president's power is based on the perception of his popularity. And we are already seeing his numbers going down. He is already seriously unpopular on the economy. His approval ratings overall are dropping. But we have within our voices as elected officials and as advocates, as voters, the capacity to continue to push public opinion in the right direction on this. That means we have to fight hard, but it also means we have to fight smart. And I'm going to deliver some hard truths for all of us right now. And that is, sometimes the messaging that is most viscerally comforting to us isn't the most effective in reaching and moving the voters we have to win over. We are all outraged by the illegal power grabs, the threat against our democracy. What is most compelling, though, to the voters we need to win to take the majority is an economic message, a message that is focused on the cost of living, a message that reinforces not the, frankly, unfortunately, abstract constitutional issues that we are facing right now, but the real and tangible harms within our own communities, within our own state. And when we all, elected officials, advocacy organizations, and yes, individual voters, volunteers through our social media, keep the main thing for voters, we know we can break through. We know we can move public opinion. We are already seeing it happen. And because of that, we know that we can not only diminish the perception of this president's popularity and therefore cause him to slow down or even revisit some decisions, because if there is one thing that Donald Trump wants, it's to be liked. We can not only do that, but we can lay the foundation to not only pick up the 3 seats we need, but to have a sizable majority in the House come January 2027.
Let me add to that if I can. I referenced a special election that's coming up on April 1st. This is in Wisconsin. for a Supreme Court judge or justice. Dane County Judge Susan Crawford is one of the candidates. This may be all you need to know. Elon Musk has already given several $1 million of his own money to the opponent. This election, and look, in Delaware, we're not used to there being judicial elections, but this election will determine the control of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. The Wisconsin Supreme Court in a previous cycle redrew badly gerrymandered state legislative lines, and it resulted in a change in control in the Wisconsin General Assembly. This Supreme Court, the one for which there's an election just a few weeks from now, may very well redraw the badly gerrymandered congressional districts in the state of Wisconsin. That might produce another 2 competitive seats in Wisconsin in 2026. So in addition to what you just heard from our Congresswoman, yes, there are critical competitive districts, several of them in Pennsylvania. If there are successes in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and in other states, in New Jersey and in Virginia, in either Supreme Court elections this year or in gubernatorial elections this year, it is possible we'll also see changes in the maps for 2026 that might give us even more opportunities. Across the whole country, it is so gerrymandered in most states that there's really only about 30 competitive seats. But if we put our heart and our effort and our resources into those seats and get Hakeem Jeffries chosen as the next speaker and get a Democratic majority in the House, we have a very different landscape. Right now, we are in the minority in the Senate and the House, and that badly limits our ability to do anything other than slow them down. So, as Senator, I'll encourage you to join in because I see you've got a point you want to make too.
Thank you, Chris. You know, one of the things Senator Coons said correctly, it will be a challenge to win the majority in the Senate in 2026. Our greatest hope and opportunity is in the House, but we're not giving up and we're not giving in. I keep this map with me, and it's a reminder that in this next election, there are, for Democrats, 13 seats that we have to hold, but for Republicans, it's 22, number one. One of those seats that we have to hold is Senator Chris Coons. So I'm going to take this opportunity to say to people, make sure that you are connected to him, that you show up, show out, and make sure we're not taking anything for granted. So we've got, again, 13 Democratic seats to hold, and 22 Republicans have to hold their seats. And then there are some potential pickup opportunities as well. I'm not going to go into all of that on the call, except to say that we can't be afraid to go in places that maybe on this map look red, because in this moment, people are thinking about, as Sarah said, their pocketbooks. Avian flu, measles are not stopping at Democrats and Republicans. These tariffs aren't saying, hey, your grill is $15 and yours is $30. That's not how it's working right now. And so we can't take any place for granted. And then lastly, I would say, for me, one of the ways that I'm trying to help is I've been asked to serve as a vice chair of the DS, which is the political arm of the Senate Campaign Committee. And so Kirsten Gillibrand is the chair, but I am one of the vice chairs with Adam Schiff and Senator Mark Kelly. And so again, we're not gonna like just take this for granted. We're gonna work it. And that's what we're gonna have to do from the next 2 years and the next 4 years. And I love a line that my sister, Senator Angela Also Brooks from Maryland, said to me on the day that we walked in to hear on the day of the inauguration. She said, Donald Trump may have 4 years, but we've got 6. So stay strong, stay strong.
Folks, I'm going to ask each of you, if you could, to close by talking about something that helps keep you going. I recognize that in the chat, we've got folks who want us to do an in-person town hall. and to do a town hall that includes state issues by including the governor, lieutenant governors, and state elected officials. Thank you for that input. We are going to keep doing town halls, both virtual and in person, political and official, in the coming weeks and months, because President Trump and his administration and the Republican majorities in the House and Senate continue to do things that are harming our families and our communities and that are alarming to us. They're not cutting costs. They're not reducing the expenses of everyday living. They're trying to undo the cuts to prescription drug prices. They're trying to undo the ways in which we've addressed a whole range of different issues about daily living. And I'm afraid we're going to be heading in the wrong direction. So I'll start by simply saying how grateful I am to all of you on this call who've sent me encouraging notes and messages, who call into my office and say, keep going, keep what you're doing. And frankly, to the great people in my office who work hard to take your calls and respond to you and provide a great constituent service to the people of Delaware. Regardless of upstate, downstate background, politics, we do our best to do a great job at constituent service on my team. So I find those encouraging. It's been refreshing to be in Delaware here today, to do the rally together with my colleagues to stand up and fight for Medicaid, and to see the range of Delawareans who are looking to us to fight for them. We are in this fight together, and I find that encouraging. So can I welcome any of my three colleagues to help close this out today by offering something that keeps you going and something that you'd like to encourage those who've been joining us tonight to do?
I'll take a shot at this, Senator. Former Senator Tom Carper used to frequently say in his speeches, the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you figured out why. This is our why. If we don't all fight for our democracy, who's going to, right? And I'm very honored to be the co-chair of the Democratic Attorney General Association. And in 2019, I came in with a lot of amazing attorneys general, brilliant lawyers and dedicated and passionate people. They are my friends, they're my colleagues. And so many of them will be up for election in really tough states, in battleground states, and even in states we think are safe. I think there's going to be a lot of money on the other side thrown at these races. But at the end of the day, it's our job. And if we don't stand up and file these lawsuits and protect the people we serve, then we don't deserve to be where we are. And we don't deserve your support. And so it is my promise to you that we're going to continue to fight like hell. We're going to win because we have courageous judges. I am so grateful for our judiciary in this country. I respect it, even when they make a decision I don't agree with, because that's who we are. That's the core of what we do in a democracy. And so I'm grateful to be in this town hall with our amazing congressional delegation, Team Delaware. And I am really grateful to work with my colleagues, Democratic attorneys general across the country. And we're going to keep going. Thank you.
And I've learned not to follow Lisa Blunt Rochester. So I will just say this. First off, our office is here. If you need something, if you need help, do not hesitate. Democrat, Independent, or Republican, we are here to serve everyone. And so please do reach out. The second thing I just want to say is, look, and I said this on a previous town hall, but I know there are a lot of people on who weren't able to join us at that one. And that is, I know this is a scary moment. And I know it's scary in part because it feels different than 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, when it felt like if we simply worked for it, if we voted and volunteered and lifted our voices, that change was inevitable. And it doesn't feel like that anymore. And what I take comfort in as I read the history books about this country and frankly about humanity writ large, what I take comfort in is the fact that that sense of inevitability that with hard work change will come, that we felt 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that is the exception in our country's history. Yes, we can't quite see the light at the end of the tunnel right now, but that is true for every previous generation of Americans who faced seemingly impossible odds much greater than the ones we face right now. Enslaved people in the 1850s had no reason to believe that an Emancipation Proclamation was on the horizon. Unemployed workers during the early days of the Great Depression had never heard of a New Deal, yet they persevered. They summoned their hope, they found the light, and they changed the world. And if we do that, I remain optimistic that we can turn, as I said earlier at our Medicaid event today, we can turn this moment into a slingshot moment where, yes, we are pulled backwards, but ultimately the tension and pressure of being pulled backwards propels us to destinations that we've not yet been. Thank you for joining.
So, this is really a hard time. People who know me know that I am a person of faith, and that even when I ran, the theme was bright hope. How do we bring bright hope to a time that could feel dark? I don't think I thought it would feel this way. And so how do I maintain? How do I keep going? In this moment, it is truly a combination of things. It is having Chris Coons on the Senate floor next to me, who I can ask, what's going on here? How do we deal with this moment? It is having an attorney general that's fighting every day, like fighting in the courts. It is having Sarah, who, despite people who try to show hate, she keeps rising above with grace. It is having a team of people around me who, while we're trying to build the plane and fly it at the same time, they are still working so hard, and I'm so proud of them and their focus, especially on our constituents and making sure that we provide the best services that we can. And it is each and every one of you, even the people who are saying things that I might not like. You have that right. And we don't want to lose that right to be able to say what we want to say. So I want to encourage people, if you are on here and you're running, like, the local level is important. Your school boards, the referendum that happens, that matters. The RDs, our Delaware Democratic Party needs your help now. Don't just be, they should do this, we should do that. Get involved. We need you now more than ever. It is still my faith that keeps me going. And it is also my granddaughter. I want there to be a planet for her. I want people to love each other. I want for people to have economic security, and not just economic security, but be able to build for their families in safe communities. So you keep me going. You keep me going. And I am just grateful. And we're going to continue to do the work. And we're not going to give up. We're not going to give in. And we're going to try to shine a bright light, even when it feels dark.
Well, thank you. Thank you to everyone who's joined us this evening. This town hall is on YouTube. It's being recorded. So for the literally thousands of people who have participated or logged on or tried to participate, it will be available on YouTube after we conclude here in just a moment. If you feel alarmed and concerned that the actions by President Trump, by Elon Musk and Doge, by the Republican majority is putting our very society and our Constitution, our economic health and our future at risk, you're right. This is a difficult, dangerous, and alarming time. We're facing a basic fight between whether ours will be a society of cruelty, selfishness, and division, or a nation of compassion and unity, and a compassionate country that is moving in a positive direction. Look, it was the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King who once said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." It only bends towards justice if we put our hands and hearts to that task and bend it. And so, as my colleagues have been saying, there's lots of good ways for you to get involved and get engaged. We need you. And this is the moment for folks who care to come together, to work together, to speak with one voice, and to stand against this change to our nation and to pull together towards a brighter and a better future. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate all of you, and we look forward to hearing from you in our offices and our community in the days ahead. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good night, folks.
Good night.